Alright guys, we're back for part 3 of this unit discussion video where we go through the units available for the anniversary selection and I give you some just brief bullet points unit per unit. So the unit we left on is Skye. Now Skye is a unit who is overall very good, and she's had like a long history of being very good. She's almost 2 years old at this point, and she's still sort of valuable. Of course, 2 years old, she's starting to show her age a little bit, but this is definitely one of the longest lasting DPSs we've ever had in the game. So when she came out 2 years ago, she was, as you know, incredibly overpowered, and she basically trivialized the Clash of Wills when she came out. And the next few, honestly speaking, she just continued to be the MVP in Clash of Wills. Then fast forward a little bit, as soon as her power started to slowly decrease as we got towards about a year old, she got an intrinsic last year, which once again just brought her all the way back to the top of the meta with her new intrinsic. And for a long time, she was incredibly good in Clash of Wills. She also has some value as a dark vision unit, as a jumper. Most people realize at this point that she double dips on jump modifiers, and she does get double hand variants, so she kind of cheats the system a little bit. And because of that, she has just been very strong. And even today, depending on the race combo of the bosses, she can still be relatively powerful in Clash of Wills. Now, of course, she is falling behind a little bit. Her stats are relatively low. The intrinsic gave her some flat stats, but even with that, it's still falling behind, the modern day units. So she's losing some power, but, Skye is a unit who has had 2 years of value, and even today, still sometimes will see use in Clash of Wills. Very good unit. Lord of the Seas Nicole is basically the water version of Sage of Thunder Sakura. He does Water Imperil, 50% Water Imperil Field, Amplify LB damage, he can fill LB gauge on a cooldown, stuff like that. Perfect to spell the enemies, perfect to spell your party, etc. A lot of good stuff going on. And he doesn't really have a replacement, whereas, Sakura has the new version. Nicole doesn't really have a new version. That being said, the reason is because water is just neglected at this point. That's kind of why they haven't replaced him. Thinking about it, I'm not even sure if in the future someone has a better or equal field to his. I'd have to look, and there probably is someone that has a water imperil field in the future. But by memory, I can't think of one. So he might even today still be the best water imperil field in JP. But I could be wrong about that. I think the Secret of Mana units in JP have fields, and one of them might have a new imperil field. I don't know. In any case, Nicole is one of the best water supports, but water is, as we've said before, not in a great place. Emperor Vlad. Now, before we get into Vlad, I will say that in a previous video, I realized I talked about like Renoa's field and being the only Dark Imperil field. I totally forgot about Vermilion Saul or Red-Eyed Saul having the Dark Imperil field. So when I mentioned that earlier, I should have said Saul is the Dark Imperil field, not Vlad and Renoa. That being said, Vlad's field, if you want to get technical about it, is better. His is 35 in peril. Renoa and Saul's field is only 30. But still, other than the field, Vlad is entirely worthless. He does absolutely nothing. His damage is irrelevant. He has no support in his kit. Nothing, really. Like, he is just a 35 Dark Imperil field, and that is it. So you would definitely rather bring Renoa, because she can deal a little bit of damage, or you'd want to bring Saul, because he does a lot better stuff. Guardian Blade Charlotte is a unit who basically never did anything. Like, she was just an abysmally bad damage dealer on release. She did get crowns later on, and upgrades, they made her technically better, but still completely irrelevant. So she is one of... We're gonna be getting to a lot of these units as we go to these older units. A lot of these units were released back in the day, and this is really a big part of why JP units have this like stigma of being trolls and worthless and terrible. Because for the first like year to year and a half of Neovisions, JP just put out one dumpster unit after another, and they were just so incredibly bad, like really bad. Like for players that have been playing since day one, you know, we didn't used to have this hate for JP units. Like we didn't. We actually used to love JP units. If you remember in the early days, like we couldn't wait for Tillith to come from JP or Warrior of Light's upgrades to come from JP. Like we used to love JP units. We looked forward to Lightning coming from JP. We got the Noctis that came from JP in the 5-star era. And all of these, like, you know, Global's Noctis was even nerfed. And he was still, after his nerfs, one of the best units in the game. That was during the 5-star era. And then during the 7-star era, once again, the 7-star era is when global exclusives started to be, you know, worth it. There were some global exclusives back in the original days, the 4 and 5-star era, the 4-star era, the 5-star era. But most of them were kind of forgettable and not really that big of a deal. Like, there were one or two that were decent, but for the most part, the 4 and 5-star era of globals were kind of forgettable. As we got into the 7-star era, it was more balanced. There were good global units, like, for example, Esther was obviously completely amazing in the 7-star era. And a bunch of others, the Jianzhu, whatever, the spirit scaling monk units. Like, we had a bunch of good 7-star global exclusives, but JP units were also really good in the 7-star area. For example, we had Bartz, and Bartz, you know, I said the 7-star Bartz, and he was amazing. There was a bunch of other good JP units during Terra was God tier. Like, how many trials did Terra carry your party in the 7-star era after her enhancements? Like, that was a JP unit. That was a JP unit. Like, JP units used to be good. Then we got to the Neovisions era, and that's when it all turned around. That's when JP started pumping out dumpster fire after dumpster fire after dumpster fire of JP units. And that's when the player base started going from, you know, global units are good, JP units are good, which one do I want to pull for? That's when it became JP units are straight garbage, and we hate JP units. Because they were just so bad for the first year and a half of Neovisions. And we're working backwards in this list, so we're like towards the point where these are like the last of the bad JP units was Guardian Blade Charlotte. Like, if we go back down the list a little bit, like, you'll notice a lot of JP units, you know, had value. Okay, maybe not. Let's go a little bit further. But, you know, Dragoon Kane, technically, you know, he got power crap, but he was good. Like, okay, I'm realizing a lot of JP units were still bad, even into the second year. But, oh my god. Okay, so maybe it wasn't until recently JP units started beginning. Wow, I'm starting. My eyes are opening here. Actually, JP units were still pretty bad late in the Neovisions as well. But here we go. Here's where JP units started getting good again. It's like Balthier, Ash, Vaughn, not Lulu, not Kimari, Yuna, Berserker Riku, Dark Knight Pain, Dagger, Kuja, Van Harma. Like, these are all good JP units. Regina, Cecil is absolutely amazing. You know, these are mascot units. Ingus is good technically. Okay, the brothers from Figaro are terrible, but Tyvus and Yish really good. Bad. He got fixed. Decent. You know, good. Like you get what I'm saying. But as we go back, like most JP units in the early days were horrible with zero value whatsoever, and that's Guardian Blade Charlotte. Guardian Blade Charlotte is just one of those JP units that had nothing of redeeming value. Her damage was garbage. You could arguably say, is she does have 3 charges of a Magnus for like 80% general mitigation. And that was during a time when 80% mitigation was not a common thing. After Runda came out, that became no good anymore. But I think she came from before Runda. Anyway, she's real bad. White Dragon Ling and Louise, we're going to talk about them individually, but these are both our anniversary units from 2 years ago. This is when Clash of Wills was introduced. Ling, at the time, was really, really good. I mean, she's still useful today, but she's been power crept, to be honestly speaking. But, the 4-star Ling from way back in the day, who she got her inspiration from, was, again, very, very powerful and very, very strong. I kind of said a minute ago, the 4-star Neovisions, the 4-star Globals weren't that big of a deal. Some of them were. For example, Ling was a 4-star Global exclusive. That was a really big deal. But anyway, her Neovisions version was really good. She had, 4 different killers. She can Mirage on demand. She can fill the party's LB gauge. She can 5-stack Mirage. I think Ling is the first unit in the game to have 5-stack Mirage AoE. I think she is the first unit ever. A few more have it after her, but I think she's the first one to ever give us 5-stack Mirage, which is really powerful on some specific encounters, like the Ashura Trial, etc. But, she can, break, dispel, heal. She fills the morale gauge. She imbues multiple elements, multiple killers. People used her for damage, technically speaking, when she first came out, and she did, a little bit of damage when she was brand new, but her damage fell off immediately. But still, she was a great support unit, and she lasted for a year and a half. And every now and then, you'll still see Ling on a budget run in Clash of Wills or something. She's not really a meta pick anymore. She does a lot of good stuff. It's just mostly been power crept at this point. There are other units that do it better than she does. But she was a great unit for a long time. Louise, at the same time, was a good unit back in the day. She did really good morale damage. She was our first morale damage dealer, and because she was the only one that scaled on morale, she did absurdly high damage, because no one else had morale damage except for her. And it was really high in Clash of Wills. Her damage did fall off relatively quickly as well, because as we started, we had Louise, and then literally the next month we had Skye, and Skye did triple Louise's damage. I don't know, I'm not sure the exact amount, but Skye blew Louise away in damage, blew her away completely. So Louise's damage wasn't relevant for long, but her support kit, again, is really good. She had, the gun in peril, the fire field, the 90% break on turn 1, no setup, which was a huge deal for so many encounters. People used her in Dark Visions all the time as a 90% breaker, because the alternative was Savior Lightning, who was terrible. Louise did that. She does, Omni Killer, immunity buffs. She can do stat buffs, mitigation. She has a lot of stuff going on in her kit. Her damage did fall off very quickly, but as a support breaker, she was used for a really long time. And even today, you still see her on OTK content, because turn 1, 90% break, and a bunch of other stuff. She can do a field break, imperil, mitigations, killer buff, stat buff, all that on turn 1. And it's really good. It's really good. Royal Puppeteer Aphmau is one of those kind of I guess experimental units where JP was trying to mix a breaker and a tank. And the problem here is JP is, I mentioned this in a previous video, JP is terrified. JP developers are scared to death of branching out into new ideas, and they're worried about power creep. So anytime they try something outside the box, they dial it so far back that makes it so weak. So they try to give you a dedicated breaker and a dedicated tank in the same unit, and they just made her weak at both. And because of that, it's just no one cares. Her tanking was really bad. She's not bulky at all. She basically has no tanking kit other than she can cast cover and 50% mitigation on a cooldown. Therefore, she's a tank. You need more than that to be called a real tank. That's kind of the entirety of her tanking kit. Like, she can cover and do mitigation on the cooldown, and that is it. That's her whole kit. And then her breaking was like 87% breaks on her LB, which is hard to fill. It's just like, it didn't work. It did. Like, if you want an example of a good breaker tank, look at Abigail. Abigail is a breaker tank done correctly. Aphmau is a breaker tank done poorly, and as a result, she was unpopular and terrible, and no one uses Aphmau for anything. She did get crowns, and her crowns gave her, like, a little bit better of her breaking ability, but even so, you still never see Aphmau because people do it better than her, and just whatever. Nappy. Nappy is a unit who is, Nappy's, how do you even evaluate Nappy? So, when Nappy came out, she was, like, good-ish, kind of. Like, Nappy was good, don't get me wrong. She was good. I just feel like I could be misremembering here. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. I remember Nappy being, like, maybe one Clash of Willows, and then you just didn't see Nappy again. Did people use Nappy beyond, like, a month? I don't remember it. I remember Nappy fading out of, like, view very quickly. Yeah, I think Nappy had a really short lifespan. And then we had Nappy's Intrinsic, one of the great dramas on Global. So Nappy's Intrinsic basically fixed none of Nappy's problems. Nappy's got a bunch of problems. I didn't really go into them. But Nappy's rotation is awkward, a lot of setup. Nappy's passive stats are absolutely dumpster. Like, Nappy has no HP, no spirit, basically no defense. The attack power is very low. The modifiers are terrible. Like, Nappy just has a lot of problems going on. And the Intrinsic gave, like, a little bit of flat stats, nowhere near enough. A little bit of modifier boost, nowhere near enough. The Intrinsic did nothing at all to fix the fact that Nappy is made out of wet paper. And then the Intrinsic, on top of that, cost 12,000 Lapis, which was just the biggest slap in the face ever. Like, the Intrinsic is straight up bad. It's like, if you had given it to us as a free gift, we still wouldn't use Nappy. Then you want to charge 12k on top of that. Like, what are you talking about? What's going on here? And that's the thing with Nappy. And then, there is one person in the entire game that bought it. So Cognix, big shout out to you for supporting Nappy. He's the only person that bought the Intrinsic. Everyone else skipped on it, and now we never have Intrinsics again because people were upset about Nappy's for good reason. Like, people had reason to be upset about it. It was a terrible situation. But Gumi read that as, we don't want Intrinsics. So, yeah. Thanks, Nappy. Diverti is one of those unfortunate JP units. So, in his base form, he's a magical tank with, again, just abysmally bad stats and passives and kind of no kit. Like, his mitigation is on a cool... Like, you're going to see a lot of this, where these tanks have their mitigations locked behind a cooldown. Like, it is the worst thing ever to be a tank, tanking a boss, the boss dispels you, and now you're sitting here like an idiot for 3 turns with no mitigation source whatsoever. Who thinks up this kind of garbage? And that's Diverti. He's just a really bad tank in the base form. And then in his shift form, he's an Earth Evoker that gives you a field. The field is weak. It's an Earth field, which we don't really use in the first place. His damage is horrible. And once again, he can't gear worth a damn at all. He is so bad at gearing. Like, really, really bad at gearing. And that's Diverti. I think he gets crowns in the near future from the Garuda Tower, maybe? I don't remember exactly. He does get crowns in the very near future. A bunch of these Season 4 units do. Diverti, Coralie, Mazurka, they all get crowns at the same time on the same event. I don't think they do anything to save him. He's one of those units I didn't even bother to calculate when he got his crowns. Like, I just assumed, like, he's so far in the dumpster, crowns cannot save him. So I didn't even look if it made him any better. I guess I should, and check it out, because maybe the crowns make him great. Who knows? And I've said it before. You can take the worst unit in the game, and with a big enough modifier boost to that unit, they become the best unit in the game. Like Legendary Sephiroth, for example. He does literally nothing except hit units with his LB. That is all Sephiroth does. And because of that, he was the best unit in the game for a period of time. He was the strongest unit in the game because his modifier was high enough. That is all it takes. That is all it takes. So if you take Diverty and you pump that modifier high enough with the crown, he can become either worth it or the most powerful unit in the game. So I don't know. I have to look at his crowns, look at his math. When he gets announced on Global, I'll do it then. And maybe he's great, or maybe he's still garbage. I'm going to lean towards he's probably still garbage, but we'll see. We'll see. Coralie is another unit. Coralie is a little bit kind of funny because twice now this has happened on JP. JP, sometimes the JP devs are self-aware and they realize things. So twice now, they have put out a unit so bad in JP that within a few days, they have to go and rebuff the unit after it's released. Coralie was so bad on release that they had to go and overhaul the unit like 5 days later and totally buff him up. Now, the hilarious thing is, after buffing him up, he was still so bad. He was still so bad you never ever see him used for anything. Just imagine Coralie as he is now on JP. He was even worse for a few days. Even worse. Yeah, so, and if you're wondering, the other unit was Class Vermilion Ace, the Neovision's Ace that recently came out. He was also so bad on day one in JP. He was so bad on day one, they again, like 5 days later, they overhauled the unit and buffed him up. He actually became good. They buffed him up properly. On Global, we got both these units, Global and Coralie, already in the buffed form on day one. So we actually never saw their original terrible form. But yeah, Coralie was the first time they put out a unit so bad they had to do an emergency patch to buff him up, and he was still garbage even after that. But at least he was better garbage in a way. But yeah, and again, Coralie gets crowns in JP too, with Diverty and all them. Coralie's crowns, they make him more of a breaker than a damage dealer, and like he can, I forget how much, 87, 88, 89, I don't know. He becomes a breaker that still doesn't deal damage. So yeah, that's Coralie. You're still never going to use him. So Pure-Hearted Vivi. Vivi is a unit who had a lot more use in JP because JP just doesn't have didn't have good mages for a really long time. And this was again before Regina. So before Regina, Vivi was your option in mage stages. You would take Steiner and Vivi would bounce back all the spells, and that would be your either fire, ice, lightning, or you could even do it Vivi with water, earth, dark, and wind, because Vivi has a modifier buff that applies universally to all magic, and you could even give him like a Roga from an Esper and bounce that back, and he could be your wind damage dealer, and it was still good enough in Dark Visions for the sub stages and all. And yeah, he bounces stuff back. These days, his stats are so bad, the modifiers are so far behind. Even if you're doing stuff like external modifier boost, like Ingus or Onion Knight shifted form, or like Merilith and all that, all of them, like you can still use Vivi if you want to, and you will still see, like, I'm not saying this in a condescending way, but lazy players that just haven't updated their Dark Visions team in a year and a half. They're still using Vivi. He still works. I mean, he still works for the most part. If you're still using Vivi a year and a half, more power to you. He still works, but he is very much power crept at this point. Like, the person still using Vivi, I guarantee you, they probably have pulled someone that will do better than Vivi. They just don't feel like going through the trouble of setting up a new team. But yeah, Vivi is very power crept in the entire game at this point. But he was fun for a long time. Cactaria is a unit who was okay-ish, decently good when she came out, and then she got some upgrades later on Global, some free upgrades, not a crown or just totally free overhaul. Honestly speaking, her free overhaul, as far as the damage dealt, she never could deal damage. Global tried to increase her modifiers, and it did increase the modifiers, but her damage is still just irrelevant. That being said, she was our first 89 breaker ever in the game, I believe. So she could be used for that, and technically speaking, you could still use her as an 89 breaker. She doesn't deal damage, but then again, neither does Lulu, neither does Laguna, honestly. So I honestly don't really know why we don't see Cactaria that often, because she is an 89 breaker. I guess the main reason is she doesn't have good imperils. Her best imperil is, I think, 150 water, or maybe 140 water. And we've talked about it before, water is not good. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of why you don't see her. But anyway, she does 89 breaks, and low in perils, no damage. Kind of it. It's really sad, too, because Cactaria is my personal favorite of that batch of unit sprites, the fan designs. We had, and I'm not trying to be mean to the other artists. All the unit designs were amazing. But, Cactaria, Kresnik, Nappy, Bulwark, Yigni. There was one more. Oh God, I'm forgetting them, and the artist is going to get mad at me for forgetting their unit. Who was the other one? Oh Lord. It was Cactaria, Nappy, Bulwark, Yigni, Kresnik, and there was 6 of them. There was one more. Who was the other one? Oh my God, who was the other one? King Behemy. Yes, King Behemy. Okay, so that was the 6 unit design winners. Cactaria was my personal favorite of the sprites. I love her sprite. I think it's so cool. The little cactus lady, I love it. I love that sprite so much. I wish she was a better unit, but she's not really. Lightning Fast Zidane is okay, so he's kind of funny too. Because of his STMR. His STMR had a little bit of back and forth drama with it as well. So I don't remember the specific what came first scenario. When his STMR came out in JP, it could only be used by specific units, very specific units. Zidane, Dagger, and some Bard units, anyone that would be considered a Bard or a singer. For example, General Celeste, because she did the opera scene, Joaquim or whatever, Gilbert, Edward, all the Bard units could use his STMR, and that was it. On Global, this is a long time ago, there was some humbug about it, about where I think I can't remember the exact drama, but there was a bunch of drama about it. I think by memory, and correct me in the comments if I'm misremembering. I think what happened was his STMR came out, and the news announced that anyone could use it, I think. And then in the game, it still had the unit locks where only Bards could use it, but because the news said anyone could, they changed it, and then after they changed it, I think it got reverted a week later in the middle of Dark Visions, and because of that, they didn't fix it in time, and then people complained that they pulled for Zidane to use in Dark Visions. Then his STMR became unusable during that week because the patch got reverted or something, and they had to mail everyone out a copy of Zidane or a copy of the STMR or an STMR. I don't remember exactly what happened. All I remember, there was basically a big humbug about it. It got changed in the middle of Dark Visions, and people got mad because they pulled for Zidane and couldn't use him because the patch got rolled back or something. I don't remember the whole thing. But the end story is, at the end of all that, Zidane's STMR was permanently changed on Global to be universally usable by anybody. And because of that, it is still, to this day, an incredibly powerful tool in Dark Visions. You see the majority of rank 1 Dark Visions parties will have someone singing Zidane's STMR, so it is still used even today. Very, very powerful STMR. As far as the unit himself, he did okay damage back on his release. Not really, though. Got power crept very quickly. He got crowns on Global. He's now a 160 Wind Imperil and an 89 defense break, which is pretty decent. And you actually saw him on some Dark Visions teams, this most recent Dark Vision, because he's a Wind Breaker. That does a little bit of damage. Not much, but a little bit. So yeah, he's still useful, but the main thing with him is his STMR is used pretty often in high-end content. Also Clash of Wills. Like, you'll frequently see Clash of Wills teams using Zidane's STMR. I personally used it last month. Because, yeah, it's good. It's really good. And it actually got buffed recently. JP changed it from like a five-turn song to a 3-turn song. Or from a 4 to a 3. In any case, now it's only 3 turns of singing for like a 5-turn buff. So it's way better now than it used to be. So it's really good. Vermilion Blade Ardyn. Now, he got global upgrades when he got released to global. And him plus Noctis, we'll get to in a minute. Where's Noctis at? Here's Noctis. So we're going to talk about both of them at the same time. Cobalt Blade Noctis and Vermilion Blade Ardyn. They got released basically back-to-back, a week apart. They both got upgrades on global. And they were, like, basically the meta for a while, like the Dark Visions where they came out, and I think the next Dark Visions, like if you didn't have these units, you weren't getting high ranks. You just weren't. And I personally didn't at the time, and I couldn't get a high rank because I didn't have the global upgraded Noctis and Ardyn. And yeah, they did really good damage. Now, fast forward a year, they were supposed to get crowns. Yet again, these are victims of global. Maybe because they got upgraded on release, global said, well, they had their moment. They're now not getting their JP crowns. And yeah, we never got their crowns. Now, to be fair, in the interest of being totally upfront, the JP crowns were not good. Even if we had gotten the JP crowns for Noctis or Ardyn, it honestly speaking would not have brought them back to the meta. The crowns were relatively underwhelming. That being said, I still feel like we should have gotten them regardless because, these are popular Final Fantasy 15 units, and there are a lot of, fans of that series. And when you're a fan of the series, like, it doesn't matter to you if the upgrades to your favorite unit are meta or not. You still want your favorite unit being upgraded. And the fact that they skipped the upgrades for these two units is really unfortunate. It feels bad. But they did. And because of that, they are both completely dead in the water and useless. And they have not seen use since their first, 2 months of release way back in the day. Luna Freya, I kind of recently made in a video about a week and a half ago, I made a joke that Luna Freya is the forgotten child on JP because as JP does upgrades, she always gets passed over. Well, just about a week ago in JP, they got a new Final Fantasy 15 event, and Luna Freya got upgraded. So she finally got around to getting her crowns in JP. That being said, they don't really make her very strong, but they make her better and, I guess, usable on a budget run or something. Mostly she got a bunch of fields. Like, she got a whole bunch of 40% fields, and that's pretty good. Like, you might put her on your party just for the field. But anyway, on global, she doesn't have any of that, and on global, she's totally power crept. Like, completely power crept. She was good for, like, a while when she came out. I don't remember if she was, like, top of the meta or anything. She might have been. I definitely recall her being good. She was definitely good. But I don't remember if she was, like, one of the top tier units during her release. I don't know. Anyway, King Behemy. So King Behemy, again, one of those fan design units. He's a physical tank. When he first came out, honestly speaking, he was pretty underwhelming. He had bad mitigations. Not a whole lot. Like, he had some cool support kits in a way. Like, he had, the Grant cover ability was kind of useful for a few gimmicks. He had good evasion. He could do, like, chaining and all that. Brave shifting and stuff. But honestly speaking, he wasn't that good of a tank because his numbers were relatively low. Global did upgrade him for free. a while later. It was kind of like a long time, like maybe a year later. But he did get upgrades to give him more meta-relevant mitigations. I think he used to have only 50% mitigation, which, as we've discussed, is absolutely trashed here. You never want to use a physical tank, or any tank, that only has 50% mitigation. That is horribly bad, like really bad. Well, Global did fix that and gave him the standard of 75, which is still too low these days. The problem is his upgrades, I believe, came after Runda was a thing. So 75 mitigation when Runda exists is why you never see Behemy. Yeah, like you need 85%. Please, developers, drill it through your head. If you want to make a tank relevant, they need 85% mitigation. That's the standard. Quit trying to give us 75 mitigation tanks. Anyway, he was incredibly good on his personal Clash of Wills. The Kairos Clash of Wills was Behemy's Clash of Wills, and he was amazing for that fight because he had all the racial mitigations. He had the evasion. He had his whole kit was custom designed to counter Kairos, the Clash of Wills number 3. And yeah, he was absolutely amazing for that. After that Clash of Wills, Behemy never really saw a lot of use, honestly. And yeah. Milo is another one of those JP damage dealers, and he is terrible. So he did get crowns in the past. Global skipped his upgrades entirely. He also got another wave of upgrades recently in JP. They're due very soon. You know, they came along with Mazurka, Diverti, all the whole Season 4 bad guy, or, kind of bad guys. They're not really bad guys, spoilers or whatever. But, yeah, the whole, what are they called? The whole Season 4 Scooby-Doo gang. It's not the Hollow Keepers. No, the Hollow Keepers are the good guys. They're the Hollow Break... Or no. The good guys are the Hollow Breakers, and they're the Hollow Keep. I don't know. They're the Hollow Breakers or the Hollow Keepers. Whatever. Who cares? They all got crowns. Milo got crowns as well. Again in JP, a second round of crowns. And they're still bad. Let's just be honest here. Even after his upgrades, he's still bad. JP just has this thing where some units are designated as being not good. And Milo is in that we're never going to be good category. I don't know why. But yeah, he's bad. He's bad even after his upgrades. So while I do want Global to bring them, because I want Global to bring all the upgrades, relevant or not, if his upgrades are skipped, I'm not really going to cry that much about it. They're not that big a deal. Kind of like Science upgrades. Like if Science upgrades had been skipped, it would have been like, whatever, not a big deal. Some upgrades matter a lot. His don't really, but I still want them though. Anyway, Amelia is a unit who... Oh, geez. How can you evaluate Amelia? So Amelia was used in a rank 1 strategy for the Secret of Mana Vision World against Belladonna. So I guess based on that, you can say she had her moment of being useful because, yeah, she was used in like a rank 1 strategy for Belladonna. So I guess she had a moment. Other than that, Amelia is just unfortunate. She's, again, a tank with absolutely terrible mitigations. And if you're a tank with bad mitigations, you're not really a tank. So, and she has nothing else going on for her. Like, she does have some killers versus, I think, Human and Beast. And she has the specific... Like, her kit perfectly countered Belladonna in that Vision World. And that's why she was used. But other than that one single point in history, Amelia has never really been that good. I think she even got upgrades at some point, didn't she? Wasn't she overhauled at some point? And she's still just not good. Like... you know, if you're a tank, you need to have more going on in your kit than just covering. Like Aphmau. Like Aphmau just covers, and that's why no one uses her. If you want people to use you as a tank, you need to do covering plus something else. Like Ash is covering plus killers. Cecil is covering plus a field. Abigail is covering plus 42 other things. Rhonda is covering plus 85 mitigation. Amelia is covering and making a pretty bunny field. And that's kind of it. Like, she doesn't do anything. And that's why no one uses her. Yeah. So Ferris Neovisions, back in the day, she was definitely meta. The early Dark Visions was all about wind element. We had the 7-star Bart's Awakening. I forget what he's called. The 7-star Bart's, that was Awaken the Neovisions, and he had the AoE 45% wind amplify. Ferris had the wind field, and that was your early Dark Visions. Was wind, because, very, very early, there were barely any fields in the game, and there was barely any elemental supports, and Bart's was one of the first elemental supports, with a high amplify, I should say, and then Ferris's field took it even higher, and that was your meta early days. Other than that, you never really see Ferris. Like, her damage has always been terrible. Even back in the day when she was part of the meta party, her own personal damage was still pretty bad. Her breaks are bad. She got crowns later on, and her crowns gave her better fields. So you might see her every now and then for like a 40% field, because she does have like the Golem field, the Leviathan field, the Ramu field. But her damage has always been bad, and it's still bad. So, yeah. Solitary Patron Snow is a dual cover tank. 90% mitigation with full uptime. And before, it used to be really hard to manage because he was really awkward to use. He got a kit overhaul, just a free upgrade, that made his kit significantly better. Now his mitigation is very easy to maintain. 90% mitigation, full uptime, always available. That being said, even though it's 90% mitigation always up, it's balanced by the fact that Snow's cover mitigation is relatively low, so that's something people kind of overlook. Is he has bad cover mitigation, and that balances out the fact that his personal 90 mitigation is so high. Still, even so, he is very, very bulky, and he covers really well, good mitigation. Doesn't do a whole lot beyond that, and that's the big problem with Snow is, you'll definitely use Snow over like Amelia. Because at the very least, Snow covers and does it well. Amelia doesn't even cover well. Amelia is squishy as hell because she has bad mitigation. Snow at least has mitigation, period. Doesn't really do anything else. Like, he's just a cover tank and nothing else. Like, no support, no nothing. But he covers really well. And he does have the dual cover. He can swap physical and magical. And unlike Maeve, there's no penalty for swapping. Maeve, I talked about it in the previous video, Maeve actually harms you by trying to dual cover tank. Snow does not. Snow has no downside to multi-covering. Anyway, Mazurka. Mazurka is, again, a unit with a funny story. So when she came out, she was real bad. Okay, let's be fair. She wasn't real bad. She was okay-ish. She was definitely behind the meta. But she did have her use. She had, when she came out, a lot of people pulled for her. I'm talking about a lot of try-hard Dark Visions players. They pulled for her because she had a Dark Visions fight upcoming where she fit very well into. I forget the specific. I think it was like a plant boss or a stone boss. I forget the exact thing. But her kit was really well designed for that boss, and she was gonna be an MVP for that boss. So a few try-hard Dark Visions players did pull for her. And then Gumi did a Gumi thing and totally changed the boss. Completely replaced the boss that was coming, and Mazurka ended up being the biggest trap of that year. Like, the biggest trap of that year. Everyone that pulled for her got completely bamboozled, rug pulled out from under them, and the one boss, the one and only boss she was ever going to see use for, got taken away by Gumi. And everyone that pulled for her was left holding the bag. And it just felt real bad. I thankfully... Well, okay, the funny thing is, I actually off-bannered a Mazurka like the week before that Dark Visions was due, and I was kind of excited. I'm like, oh my god, I got the unit for free that is going to be the silver bullet for this upcoming fight. So I was kind of happy. I didn't actually invest for her. Like some players went all the way, 45k pity or whatever it was during that time period. And they got really screwed. But I was still kind of upset because when they changed I was happy to pull her because I was going to use it. And they changed the boss and I didn't get to use her. Never did. And yeah, she's never been good since. She did get an intrinsic on Global. Now, she was supposed to get crowns. Global changed her crowns to an intrinsic ability, which in this case is actually a downgrade because it's literally just her crown ability, but it takes a materia slot. And that's worse. That really is just worse. So this is a case where intrinsics were a bad thing because it took her it took her no gear consuming upgrade and it took away a materia slot to use it. Even with the intrinsic, she's still bad. Now, she is getting another round of upgrades with the Hollow Knights or whatever. Mazurka, Diverti, Coralie, Milo, all of them got an upgrade at the exact same time. If we get her upgrades, hers are actually decent. So unlike the other DPS units like Coralie and Milo, Mazurkas are actually pretty decent, and she can actually be relevant on a fire party. So that's kind of the signal that Global is probably going to skip hers. We're probably going to get Diverti and Milo and Coralie's upgrades, and Mazurkas they're probably going to be like, well, we gave you the intrinsic. Isn't that good enough, guys? We're not going to give you the real upgrades. I'm kind of making a joke here, but I would not be surprised if that turns out to be true. We'll have to see in the very near future. That's due. I think based on the JP schedule, it's literally due next week, like the week after the coming event. So we'll have to see if in a week we get it or not. It'll be fun to see. Savior of Souls Lightning. Actually, I think it's 2 weeks away. In any case, Mazurka is due very soon. Whether it's a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's due very soon. Anyway, Savior of Souls Lightning. So this is a unit who she introduced the problem with true double hand and true dual wield again. So for a period of time, double hand and true dual wield was relatively balanced because double hand had the 4 times cap with variance 1.5, made it about a 6 times cap, whereas true dual wield had the 6 times cap but no variance. Then Lightning came along and gave us her STMR, which broke all the rules, and now all of a sudden, true double hand units are using the 6 time cap. And this is why for, 2 years? True dual wield was absolutely worthless because Lightning just made double hand flat out in every possible way superior. So after she came out, even units that are not supposed to be using double hand, you had to force double hand on them. Well, that's more of a symptom of her STMR than the unit itself. The unit itself, 90 Spirit Break, and that's it. Like, she does a little bit of damage. Honestly, not really. Like, she's a wannabe damage dealer, but she doesn't, like, deal any damage, honestly. Like, she did... No, she really didn't do any damage. Like, she was just a 90 breaker and then STMR, and that's kind of it. Axstar and Cleome. So this is these were all anniversary, by the way. Rain and Fina, Laswell Reagan, Dark Fina and Saul, Axstar and Cleome, and Faisalis and Charlotte, but they were actually a free unit, so not in here. These were all JP anniversary units, and in JP, they were okay, decent. Laswell Reagan were the good ones. The rest of them were kind of like, eh. Like, they were okay. Rain and Fina was okay. Dark Fina and Saul were pretty much bad always. And then Axstar and Cleome were okay. But mostly Laswell and Reagan were the good ones. But all four of these were JP anniversary units. And they were decent on JP. On Global, like, they weren't, specifically speaking, bad. But Global definitely had better options when they came out. So you weren't really caring that much about these units. Rain and Fina, or actually all four of these are tag chainers. They're all tag chainers. They introduced tag chaining as a mechanic, in fact. These were the original tag trainers. Laswell Reagan did the most damage. Rain and Fina did the second most damage. Axstar Cleom did okay damage, and Fina and Saul were just the worst, period. And the reason for that is, by the way, because this is back in the day when magical damage did not get variance. So going from this point backwards, every single mage on this list is going to be worthless at the time they came out, because back in the day, magical damage had no variance. So mages were a joke back in the day. So because of that, Dark Fina and Saul were horrible, because they dealt magic damage, and magic damage was completely worthless. On the other hand, Axstar Cleom did good damage, Rain and Fina did good damage, and then Laswell Reagan did great damage. That's kind of it. They were tag chainers that did damage of varying degrees of usefulness. That being said, like I said, I think Esther was out on Global, and or was she? No. Esther came later. There was some damage dealer that, I forget who it was, but there was some global damage dealer that was just better at this point in time. I forget who it was. Maybe it was Elena? I don't know. But because of that, you didn't really see them that often. Laswell Neovision. So this is where we're getting to the really super troll JP units. Just like Milo, Laswell Neovision just doesn't do anything, period. He's just straight garbage. No damage at all. I mean, people are going to argue, like, oh, he did some magical damage back in the day. There were mage stages he needed to do. You needed mages, and he was a physical imbuable mage. But, I mean, he was just low damage, period. So all he does is damage that is low. Locke. Locke was the first 90% breaker. No, he wasn't actually on Global. Who was the first? Was he the first 90 breaker on Global? I don't know. He was definitely the first 90, or the first 89 breaker in JP with his crowns. I think he was the first one on Global, or was Laura Croft first for 90 breaks? It might have been Locke as well. I don't remember, honestly. Or was it Venera? No, I think Venera was our first 90 breaker on Global. Yeah, I think it was Venera, then Locke's crowns, then Laura Croft, then Hawkeye, then Wilk. We have a lot of 90 breakers on Global for defense. Am I getting the order correctly? In any case, Locke's whole purpose was he was the first 89 breaker on JP with crowns. He didn't have crowns on day one. On day one, he was pretty terrible, pretty worthless. He got crowns later on that gave him an 89 break. On JP, on Global, it's a 90 break. But Global definitely had alternatives before Locke. So yeah, that's all he is. Terra Neovisions. Terra Neovisions was an exception. And she's probably the reason that JP now hates evokers and makes every evoker bad. Because Terra literally broke the game. Terra quite literally broke the game. So when Terra came out, she was dealing so much damage. So much. She was overflowing the game in JP and Global. Like, she was literally overflowing the damage. It was that high. And it broke the game. It broke Dark Visions. They had to patch Dark Visions and fix it and redo the whole damage formula with the whole 2.4 64-bit. I don't know the whole technical workings of it. All I know is when Terra came out, if Terra was on your party, you would deal 1 damage. And the reason you would deal 1 damage is because her damage would overflow so high, it would overflow to -1, and you would deal 1 damage. And it broke the game. And they eventually patched that to where when your damage overflowed, it didn't overflow to 1. But yeah, she did a lot of damage, and she was overpowered and broken and did a ton of damage, and that's all there is to it. And because Terra did so much damage, they said, oh, evocation is overpowered. Never again. From now on, evokers are always terrible. And then we had, like, Diverti, Rydia, Luna Freya, there were some other evokers too, Lena. Like, all these evokers are still using Terra's mod. Like, Terra's mod is like, I think 90 or 80. Every evoker since then is using the exact same modifier. Yuna as well. Because the JP devs are scared to death of Terra because she was so powerful. They're like, we can never again have a good evoker because Terra scared us this much. And yeah, so now we're still 2.5 years later, evokers are still coming out with an 80 modifier as their damage. Like, we're getting a new Rydia in the future. Guess what her LB is? 80. 80. The same as Terra's was 2.5 years ago. They're that scared of her. Anyway, yeah. So, Onion Knight Neovision is a unit who has really cool ideas and mechanics. So, he has a thing where he does kind of like the Bart's thing, where the 7-star Bart, where he does a ramping charge up that are permanent duration. So he does like a level up system. So he spends the first 3 or 4 turns doing these permanent level ups that boost his modifiers. And then after turn 7 or turn 6 or 7, he starts unlocking even more permanent buffs, like a permanent mitigation and permanent stat buffs and all that. And it's a really cool idea where he does his whole level up gimmick, and he spends the first 7 turns of a fight powering up. As you can imagine, the issue with that is, for one thing, even if you do the entire 7 turns of level up mechanic, and on turn 8 you have all his permanent buffs active, his damage is still straight terrible. Garbage damage, even after all the power-ups. And now the issue is, you could either go through 7 turns of power-up of Onion Knight to get a terrible payoff, or you could use Rick's LB on turn 1. See the problem here? It's like, I love the idea of Onion Knight. It's such a cool idea to do all these power-ups and permanent boost to get ready. And if after all of this, he was powerful, it would be amazing. He would be the perfect trial unit. Like, you take him to the Grace of whatever trial or the Evil Princess trial, you spend 7 turns powering up, and then all of a sudden you've got a 4 times powered Rick. That would be super cool. Obviously, it wouldn't be that good in Dark Visions because, well, actually, I guess you could do past turn 5. I'm thinking you have to do it by turn. You don't have to do a turn 5 clear in Dark Visions. But whatever, you get the idea. The point is, if he was worth powering up for 7 turns, it would be awesome. But he's not. Even if you do that, his damage is still garbagely bad. And he does get upgrades in JP. He got crowns. As you can expect, the crowns did not save him. He's still terrible. Still. Faisalis Neovision recently got crowns. She was a unit that she was decent on release. She did pretty good. Even though she was a mage, and mages don't get variants back in the day. She didn't get variants back in the day. She still hit okay-ishly decently hard. She also got crowns recently. In the past few months, she got crowns. And they made her a lot better. The issue is she still does not have a 150 amplify, and I've talked about it before. In today's metagame, if you don't have a 150 amplify, you better justify your position with a buff or a utility, like a field or a party killer buff or a break or something. Other than that, if you're just a damage dealer and you're not bringing a 150 amplify, you ain't coming to the party. And that's her. She doesn't bring any support for the party at all. She is literally just a damage dealer and has no amplify, or no good amplify. And that's why you never see her. Madame Adele Neovisions. So again, here we go. So Madame Adele has the same gimmick as Onion Knight, where you spend actually it's 12 turns for her. She needs 12 turns to reach her max potential. And her damage was, not anymore, but back in the day, her damage was worth it. If you spent 12 turns on Madame Adele, on, for example, the Asura fight, if you spent 12 turns powering her up, she would just cut through a trial like nothing. She was absolutely worth spending 12 turns to power up. Now, the issue here is, during those 12 turns, you could have just won the fight with a regular unit. Like I said, like Rick. If Rick is doing, X damage on turn 1, then Rick is getting 12 turns of that damage, while Adele is just tickling the boss, waiting for her fully powered up moves to come in. And the issue is, the fight would just be over by the time Adele reached that point. Now, the thing is, Adele was worth it after reaching that point. It's just that, in reality, fights didn't last long enough for that to matter. If a fight ever did go 12 or 24 turns, Adele would have been one of the highest damage dealers in the game for that fight. It's just that fights were over way before then. She did get crowns, and her crowns did buff her up significantly. They gave her like a 3600 X finisher. I forget the exact. I think it's 3600. And that was good in theory. The problem is that was one of the very, very early crowns. Global skipped her crowns for like 6 months. And when her crowns eventually came 6 months late, as you can imagine, by that point it was power crept. If her crowns had come on time, you would have absolutely seen her in Dark Visions. No question. You would have seen her in Dark Visions. She would have been the #1 damage dealer for a brief period of time. It's just that Global skipped her crowns for 6 months, and when they finally did come, her time had come and gone, and it was too late. At that point, she was no longer worth it, and it feels really bad because she could have had a moment. Shoreline, Fina, and Daisy. So this is a unit that was kind of game changing. So this is one of the very, very, very early Neo Visions. I think she's like the fifth one or something, like 6th or 7th, I don't know. But she was one of the first Neo Visions, and she was game changing. She did so much. She was one of the units that people said was brokenly. I think she was literally the first Neo Visions that people called brokenly overpowered. Was her, because she did everything. She did all the resist buffs. She did 80% AoE mitigation, and this is back in the very dark ages of Neo Visions. 80% mitigation back in the day was non-existent. Like, it didn't exist, period. And here comes Phasey with full uptime for the entire party of 80% mitigation. Like, it was powerful. It was real powerful. She introduced the preemptive cover mechanic, which allowed you to negate things like Shinryu or Intanger, the ambush attacks. Those used to be a thing. She completely negated that. She was absurdly bulky. This is back in the day. Obviously, these days, she's horrible. But, in the first 3 months of Neo Visions, she was immortal. You could not kill her. She was that bulky. And yeah, she was overpowered. She did infuse, imperils, amplifies for the party. She, I think she had killer buffs. Maybe, no, I don't think she had a killer buff. But she was a breaker. She was the first overpowered unit. Of course, power creep moves on. She lost her position as best unit ever, and now these days she's worthless. But once upon a time, she was overpowered. Firion is one of those troll units. So when he came out, useless. Completely useless. He did nothing. And I can already tell there's going to be a Final Fantasy II fan in the comments. You're wrong. Firion was a meta. He carried me on the something trial. I will tell you, just straight up, Tifa did it better. So if you use Firion for any content whatsoever, you could have done it quicker with Awakened Tifa, the plain old 7-star Tifa. And a lot of these early damage dealers, the issue is, why weren't you using Tifa? Tifa completely overpowered pretty much everyone until Adele. Adele was the first damage dealer that kind of put Tifa in her place a little bit. But yeah, so Firion was a finisher that hit weaker than Tifa. That's all there is to it. He did no damage. Firion eventually got crowns, and the crowns, they were okay if you invested the crowns in him. The problem was Firion's crowns were very early in the crown meta or whatever. So crowns were very, very rare back in the day. So it was a really hard ask to justify giving 4 crowns to Firion, because while technically it was worth it, it was at a time period where most players didn't have 4 crowns just laying around. Like these days, we've got a lot of crowns. Back in the day, we didn't always have 40 crowns sitting on the shelf. So most people didn't invest in Firion, and because of that, and even if you did invest in Firion's crowns, like he didn't last that long. He was good for like a month and a half, if that. Gabranth was the first, Neovision's good physical tank, and he was good. And there were a few physical tank trials that we had to use. What's the name? Ashura. Gabranth was amazing for tanking Ashura. I think he was the best one for the Ashura trial. And yeah, Gabranth was a bulky physical tank. That's all there is to it. He tanks. He's got some other stuff in his kit. Like he's got I think he has breaks, maybe. I don't know. He's got 1 or 2 goofy support things, but mostly he just covers and tanks. And he was really good at it. The Ashura trial is the big physical tank trial, so he was good for the Ashura trial. The issue is that was kind of the only trial that wanted a physical tank. Pretty much all the rest of the trials were magical tanks, and that's why you didn't see Gabranth too often, except for Ashura. Saul Neovisions was useless, did no damage. He was the first magical vision card, but other than that, people would say you want to pull Saul so you can have his vision card for future units, not for Saul himself. Saul himself did basically no damage. The reason is, for one thing, back in the day, mages didn't have variants. On top of that, we had Tifa. So once again, why are you not using Tifa? That's the answer at all times to these early DPS. Starlight Elena, she was good damage. Again, Tifa did more damage in a burst, but Elena could do consistent damage per turn. So if there was a fight Tifa couldn't just erase in one burst, Elena would be good for the follow up, stuff like that. And yeah, Elena was okay-ish, never super meta, but she was good when she came out. She was, I guess she was meta when she first came out, sure. She got crept, eventually, but she was good early on. After her intrinsics, she became really good for damage per turn. Not so much today because power creep, whatever. Her intrinsic was like a year and a half ago at this point. But yeah, so she was good for a while, and then her intrinsic came out, and then she was really good for a few more months. For a while, decent, and she's still okay for damage per turn. But like I said, just power creep. It's just she's literally one of the first Neovisions ever. So yeah. Yoshikiri was, he had some buffs and some good stuff in his kit. He's kind of I've noticed people are usually split on him. Some people say he was great. Some people say he was forgettable. I'm kind of in the middle of the pack. I do realize a lot of people used him in Dark Visions, and he was on a lot of top teams. So yeah, he was good. I feel like he wasn't a required. He was good on trials. Yeah, I actually remember using Yoshikiri for the flower trial and Tanola, and he made it really easy, and that was a sort of difficult trial when it first came out, and Yoshikiri really trivialized it. So yeah, I guess Yoshikiri, he had his uses. After his intrinsic, he again, it was not the best intrinsic. It gave him a new buff. He also got global upgrades that gave him the EX3 skill, Frozen LCD. That one's really good because that gives you some good bursts. And yeah, so Yoshikiri, he's decent-ish. Probably the biggest problem with Yoshikiri is, for one thing, we're for the most part not using water as an element. Also, his amps are only 45%, which is just outdated at this point. Ayaka does ice AoE 100%, and we don't have AoE 100 water, but we do have lots and lots and lots of we have the most single target water amps. We got Nicole, we've got Yuna, we've got the vision card that gives it to anyone, etc. So like a lot of sources of single target water amps. So yeah, Yoshikiri, not so much these days. Awakened Dragon Axstar is, again, one of those super, super dud units. And, again, I can already see it in the comments. There's going to be someone like, actually, I used Axstar and he was OP. And I'm going to say, guess what? You could have used Tifa. I'm going to drive that point home. I am a strong believer that Tifa was the answer to everything in the early Neovisions days. Now, I know a lot of people hated Tifa, myself included. I hated Tifa. I hated the fact that Tifa trivialized everything. I hated that. But I'm not gonna stick my head in the sand and pretend like she didn't. So there were a lot of people that would refuse to use Tifa, and they would do clears like with Axstar. They would use Elena. They would use, the Aerith. They would use Cloud because, why would I use Tifa for everything? It's not fun. I understand that. It probably wasn't fun using Tifa on every single fight. But she was a freely given unit that trivialized every single fight for like 6 months of Neovisions. So, yes, you could have used Axstar if you wanted to. He got the job done. Sure, I understand that. Or you could have used Tifa. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah. So because of that, I'm going to say he was useless because a free unit did the same thing he did. There you go. Aerith Final Fantasy Remake. She was, technically speaking, a great healer. But, like, as far back as forever, you just don't use healers in Brave Exvius. Like, since the days of Tillith, we've stopped using, Tillith was like the last dedicated healer we've really used on parties. You just don't use healing in Brave Exvius. It's a shame. Healing is a secondary concept on fights. And yeah, so even though Aerith was an amazing healer, you don't use healers. So we don't use Aerith. And then in her shift form was, she was a damage dealer. And again, people did use her for trials. I used her on like the Coralie trial because I could. You can. Did Tifa do it better? Hell yes, she did. Tifa did it quicker too. But you could have used Aerith, and I used her for videos because it's fun to mix it up. But again, you could have used Tifa. Rain Neovisions was pretty terrible. Like, he was always pretty terrible from day one. Again, he had his shift form. It killed stuff. I do know, if you want to call back to the old days, Meet Me on Mars loved Rain, the Hyo form. He'd use Rain in all kind of videos and blew up stuff. You definitely could have done that, and he did get the job done. So did Tifa. But Rain worked if you really wanted to, sure. Rain did get crowns, and he was the first like big amplifier in the game. 55% fire amplify for the party after crowns, and then I forget how much, but really big fire in peril, like 140, which back in the day was a lot. Yes, and Rain was a big deal for Dark Visions fights as a support unit. Or, I'm a damage dealer too, but mostly as a support unit. Because he was the first really big elemental support. So there was Rain, and then later on, like I said, the combo of Bartz plus Ferris was better than Rain because that was like 75 total amp, whereas Rain is 55. But he saw use. And then Cloud, the first Neovisions ever. So people, here we go again. So the reason people pulled for Cloud? So you could get his vision card to give the Tifa. That's why you pulled Cloud. You pulled Cloud for the vision card to put on Tifa. And Tifa carried stuff for you. And once again, in the comments, I already know, people are going to argue with me, and they're going to say, but Cloud killed stuff too. Yeah, I know he did. But Cloud cost you 45,000, or whatever the pity. I think the pity used to be actually 28k. So Cloud cost you 28k. Tifa was given free. So yes, Cloud absolutely cleared the trials for you. But Tifa did it for free. Anyway, yeah. Cloud, special shout out though to his STMR, which is still used today. Even today, Cloud's STMR is still amazing. Maybe not as good as it used to be, because these days a lot of units only need 100% true double ham. So you'd rather use something like, you know, what's her name? A2's STMR, etc. But yeah, you know, it's still really good. You know, not all units have 300%. Some units only have 200, and Cloud's STMR is absolutely the one-size-fits-all to cap you out. And Cloud's getting upgrades next week, so he'll be better. So this video went a little bit longer than usual. You know, an hour 15, and I can't wait to read the comments about how I overhyped Tifa, because she, you know, Tifa. Like I said, a lot of people didn't like Tifa, myself included, because people think she was a mistake. Probably was. Anyway, I do plan to do part 4. We're going to go through the limited units as well as the premium units. And then I might even do like a part 5 with all the recent units, just for fun. The recent units that came out after Irvine that are not on this list. So I might do like just a brief, you know, look at units after Irvine up to today. Anyway, it's been fun to talk about units, give my opinions. As usual, these are all just my opinions. If you feel that I am wrong or incorrect, that's how I remember things. I remember Tifa dominating the game for 6 months, even if units like, you know, Rain, Cloud, Firion, Axstar could have gotten the job done. Maybe, arguably, they got the job done more efficiently. I still feel like, okay, okay, no more Tifa. Tifa's done. The Tifa discussion, I will continue that in the comments, because I already know someone's going to argue with me. All right, see you in a bit.